So, did you make contact with aliens? Were you taken to another planet, to a mothership? How did they communicate with you? Can you tell me what they look like? Can you tell me how many of them there were? Were you given food?
But the teachers are alive. They're not books. They are the very living essences of nature itself.
What a strange person.
Unbelievably powerful supercomputer that's running our reality, and we don't have a clue as to how to operate it.
So when maybe you or somebody else creates an AGI system and you get to ask her one question, what would that question be? What's outside the simulation?
Say in your mind, say to yourself, I am more than my physical body, because I am more than physical matter. I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world.
About reality. Do not claim to know the ultimate truth about life. I see that as just an image as a part of many and explorers of consciousness. I'm the void.
Welcome to Lighting the Void.
Broadcasting from a shack on a hill in the mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void, and I am your host, Joe Rupe. Tonight, we're going to have the one and only Mark Devlin on the broadcast on this Thursday night. I want to say, too, like real quick, there's a little bit of a technical issue here going on, so we'll get that worked out, too. But thank you all for showing up last night, man. You guys, really... Man, you broke the phones. You did. And we had a good time, and I want to thank Mary Ducina for coming on the show last night. Tomorrow night we'll do open lines, and we'll kick it off again next week. I want to also say, too, that this show is going to be going on 2 hours, and then starting next week we're going to bring Ryan's show back, which is going to be right after this show. And so it's going to be the same thing, except... my show is going to end an hour early, and Ryan's show is going to start an hour earlier, which I know a lot of you are going to really like that. And so I think that's going to really help us get a lot more listeners, because we have a lot of people that talk about Ryan's show. They say, man, it's still on too late. I want to hear it. A lot of people like to hear it live, so this will help me, free me up for the station, too. I want to thank the network sponsors real quick. Metaphorical Archaeology. Give Barbara a call, 214-995-3754. You know what to do if you've had any type of paranormal experience that's caused you trauma or post-traumatic stress. That's who you call. Also, getthetea.com and ancientlifeoil.com. And go to ufoseekers.com. The only people we trust in ufology, and if you follow them, you'll know why. youtube.com/UFO Seekers. Yeah, so all week long we've had this kind of theme going on where everybody's going through these transitions and stuff. And even Monday night, we definitely had a discussion with Ryan and Dan, and all the archives are out right now, about just how frustrating all of this is. And I can tell you that, it's not just that here in the States, it's everywhere. People are frustrated across the board. And we're going to talk to Mark Devlin about that as well. And I do, it's the first time I've gotten to talk to him, so of course I'm going to talk about his book and his research as well. Now, if you've never heard of Mark Devlin, He's a UK-based club and radio DJ, music journalist, and author. And as a DJ, has played gigs in over 40 different countries. And in 2010, he underwent what he refers to as a conscious awakening, bringing a new awareness of what's really going on in the world. His special area of interest was how this ties into the mainstream music industry and the ways in which it has been used to manipulate and mind control the masses in line with a much larger agenda. He now presents public talks on these subjects, as well as appearing on radio and producing 2 regular podcast series. In early of 2016, he published his comprehensive book, Musical Truth, with its follow-up, Volume 2, in 2018, and his debut novel, The Cause and the Cure, appeared in early 2020. And the website for reference is markdevlin.co.uk. You can also go to youtube.com/Mark Devlin TV. And I hope that we have, I don't know if we've got you guys here or not. Can you guys hear me? Ryan Gable's also here with us. Can you hear me, Mark?
I sure can, mate. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I can. Right
okay.
here.
So I brought Ryan on here with us along because Ryan's also had Mark on the show quite a bit. And I wanted to just kind of kick off this discussion with, we were talking earlier before the show and, about the conscious state of this, like as far as how it's psychologically messing with people, you know. And this is something that's kind of obvious, but I think we need to pay attention to. Mark, I'd like you to comment on this because I've watched some of your YouTube videos just about how frustrating it is. I mean, just the doom and gloom that's going on out there.
Sure. I put out a rant video last week, which was completely spontaneous, and it was inspired by an unfortunate experience I had going into the town centre here and seeing how everybody was obeying these ridiculous, humiliating, degrading methods that have been put into place in the stores and the banks. So everyone's obediently queuing outside these places, standing behind bits of tape on the floor, obeying one-way systems around the store. You got somebody on the door of each shop, limiting the number of people that can go in at any one time, telling you where you can go, where you can stand, what way round you got to go through the store, where you got to queue up to pay and how long you got to wait and all this. And I just snapped because I thought this is straight madness. This is insanity. And everyone just seems to be cooperating with it without question. Nobody displayed any sign of thinking this was ridiculous. This was overreaction. This had overstepped the mark. Nobody seemed to be getting angry about it. Everyone just accepted that because this is the new normal, we've been told, and these are the rules and the regulations, you've just got to obey them. And I came back and I just felt the anger and the rage ripping through me at how ridiculous society has become in a very short period of time. So I just let rip on that video. And as I said at the start of it, I had to lock myself away in my car because the kids were in the house and I knew I was just going to vent. And so I just expressed myself exactly as I felt at the time. And the video really seems to have struck a chord with people. I've received a ton of correspondence every single day. I wade through emails from all over the world, from people that have told me that I articulated exactly how they feel about this ridiculous situation. And YouTube is currently showing that that video's had 39,000 views. Well, I've had almost 39,000 emails saying that people watched it. So I think the figure is far higher than that. I think it's gone viral, to use that term. But the figures aren't showing that. And that's exactly how I felt last week about it, and that's exactly how I feel now. And we were just talking off air there about the psychological effect on humans of only getting bad news and doom and gloom, because you get this every time you switch on the mainstream media. If you choose to listen to what they're saying, you have a newsreader coming on with a solemn expression and a grave tone, and you know that dramatic music and COVID-19, the latest news, this number of people have died, the government says these measures must stay in place for several more months if we're to get on top of this situation. And then if you choose to go to the alternative media and listen to what truthers are saying, and the vast majority of people that I correspond with on Facebook are, you know, truthers, alternative thinkers, you're just getting more doom from them. They're just giving you different types of doom. They're saying this is the end game, this is the New World Order, Agenda 2030, we're going to be in lockdown perpetually now, our lives are never going to get back to what they were, we've lost our freedoms. Now, what good does it do anyone to only get that kind of information with no hope, no optimism, no good news, no glimmers of hope on the horizon? And that's what we've been subjected to these past 4 or 5 weeks. And it has a devastating effect on the human psyche, which I can testify from personal experience, and on mental health. So there's a whole load of people out there that are just going to be depressed and not in a good state mentally or spiritually as a result of all of this.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. If you ever watched any of those old World War II clips or World War clips, even when we had like the biggest war and there were people dying all over the place, they still would play like happy stuff and talk about, stay in good spirits because this is happening and da-da-da. You don't hear none of that. None of that. Like, it's obvious that there's some type of like psychological stuff going on here. I mean, it's not hard to get angry and depressed, and I got to be honest with you, I sneak out all the time, man. I go to the store, I go everywhere, and nothing seems like it's devastating to me. Nothing.
Well, nothing feels normal either. I don't know if you have the same experiences as me, but I go out all the time, and everything just feels dead. Because there's no life to it anymore, because people are hiding away. The problem we've got is most people in society are buying the official story that we're told by the governments and by the mainstream media, because they still haven't twigged that the government is not there to protect you and doesn't have your best interests at heart, and the mainstream media is not there to tell you the truth. Many people still believe that the government and the BBC and all these news networks are their friend and are there to help them. So they're buying the official line, which is, if we all stay indoors for many more weeks or even months, then we can knock this virus on the head and people will stop dying. We've just got to make that sacrifice and then everything will get better. And they're also buying the official story that a vaccine is on the way. I mean, it's so bloody obvious what this whole agenda has been all about now that they've started talking about vaccines and Bill Gates' name is attached to it. But people are clinging on to that now. And normies, as they're called, seem to think that the minute a vaccine comes along and we all take it, then everything's going to get better and we'll be protected against this virus and then life can get back to normal. And we've even had this mantra from certain governments, we're getting it from the UK government right now, that life cannot get back to normal and society won't be as you knew it until mandatory vaccinations come in and we've all taken one. Well, here's one that will never be taken a vaccine under any circumstances. And I know there's a hell of a lot of other people out there that feel the same way. I think if there's going to be any kickback at all to this narrative, it is going to be on the issues of vaccines, because while many people will willingly wait in line and roll up their sleeve to take it, I think there's been so much controversy and so much discussion over the general subject area of vaccines that there's going to be a big pushback, even from people that don't realize this whole narrative is a sham, is a farce, is a con. They might buy that there's a virus out there, but I think they're still going to be rejecting a vaccine, especially for their kids, if it's said to be mandatory. I just don't think people are willingly going to go for that in as many numbers as they would have hoped. I do hope I'm correct about that.
Well, herein lies the dilemma and the perplexing point of this, and this is kind of why I wanted to bring Ryan on here with you, because there's also, from the truth community, things can get really out of whack, and I think Ryan has talked about that a lot on his show too, and Ryan is really trying to express our viewpoint from an unpolar point of view. Is very hard to do on the radio and broadcasting when everybody loves controversy so much, but it's not a solution to be polarized and be crazy and hysterical either. So I'm just curious, like, you hear Mark Ryan talk about how he doesn't believe in the narrative, or he's suggesting that he doesn't believe in this whole narrative. What are your thoughts on that, Ryan?
I think things.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I'm here, Joe. I think things are like a game of telephone, where you say something to the person next to you, and then they pass it down, and by the time it gets to the end of the table or wherever you're sitting, it's a completely different commentary. And I think that happens a lot with any kind of information. So what you have are people that question official narratives, and a lot of people that don't trust authorities, whether that's in media or politics. And as a result of not trusting those official narratives and those official authorities, the authority figures, they turn to the opposite. So anything opposed to official stories, anything that's opposite of what the authorities say, is perceived to be correct. And there are groups of people that are going to use that naivety to make money and to sell ideas online, clickbait, frauds, amateur conspiracy theorists, whatever you want to call them. And there are others that naively will believe those things or promote those things that are the opposite because they feel that it's more correct because it's not the official narrative. So when you have something, for example, like fifth generational technology like 5G, that seems to be the opposite concept and reasoning behind COVID-19. Even people that I know personally are asking me, well, do you believe that the virus is real or do you think it's fake and caused by 5G? And I say, I don't know. Someone just asked me in the chat room a moment ago about the same thing. I don't know what that question means. I don't know what that implies. What do you mean the virus is a hoax? What do you mean the virus isn't real? Like, there needs to be a little bit more context and a little bit less polarization. Something can be real, something can be fake. It's the wording that's really important. So I tell people, I think from the information that I've seen, that the virus is manufactured in a laboratory. Top virologists agree with that, mainstream and alternative. We've seen major studies that suggest that it's a biological weapon. People say, well, if it's a biological weapon, why aren't a lot of people dying? I say, well, where's your proof that a lot of people aren't dying? And I also say, just because it's a biological weapon doesn't mean that it's going to kill a lot of people, because a really strong virus would keep its host alive. And if something was engineered and manufactured to spread a disease and to spread perhaps something else like HIV that leads to AIDS, it wouldn't necessarily kill a lot of people. It would infect a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So these are the kinds of things that we need to have a discussion about, rather than resulting to either what Mark's saying, fear, paranoia. And a lot of that's because of trauma and because people are not mentally prepared on average for dealing with things because we're complacent and we are compliant. But we need to be able to have open discussions and stop reducing everything to an us versus them, cabal versus the alliance, deep state versus the white hats, making things so polar that we can't have a conversation about what's going on without relying on one extreme or the other. That's my problem. We need context, we need perspective, and we need objectivity.
And Mark, would you agree with that?
Well, we certainly do. And what I see is apparent muddying of the waters by the architects of this narrative and all these other events we get presented to us. It seems to me like confusion is being deliberately sown in the alternative truth-seeking community. So there are no clear-cut answers as to what's going on, and you do get different factions arguing with each other. As Ryan just said, some people will claim there is no virus, and that the symptoms that people are showing have been caused by exposure to 5G radiation, and then others will insist that there is a virus and it was cooked up deliberately in a laboratory and unleashed. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle of that, and maybe, well, it seems people certainly are dying of something. I mean, we've seen footage from hospitals which are claimed to be overrun with virus patients, and they're empty. People have shown that there's just nobody in there, and yet other hospitals are reporting that people are dying of these horrific symptoms, which seems to involve the lungs filling up with fluid and people having problems breathing, people having problems getting enough oxygen. So that could be consistent with exposure to 5G radiation. It could be some other disease that's been unleashed. But it seems that there are a combination of factors at play here, and it's not easy to pinpoint exactly what's going on. That's why I say confusion is being deliberately sown. And we see this quite often with these terror events, these false flag terror events, so-called, where you have some lone nutter going and shooting up some place, whether it's a school or whether he's running a rampage over London Bridge or something. And you have certain reports that it was actors involved. People that are on the scene will say, oh, well, I could tell they were actors. They were just rehearsing a script and this guy was pretending to be dead, but it was fake blood. And then you see the body move when somebody calls cut. And then other people will say, no, I know someone that was there and they've genuinely died. So then you have to think to yourself, well, maybe it's a combination of a genuine event which has been embellished with fictional elements deliberately to confuse everyone, so no one can put their finger on exactly what happened. And I think we're seeing a lot of that play out with this narrative here, the whole coronavirus thing. Just going back to what you were saying there, Joe, about the doom and gloom that's being peddled by so many people in the alternative realm. I think as truth researchers and as alternative media presenters, we have something of a responsibility not to dump a load of doom and gloom on people. I think we have a responsibility to show the optimistic side or any faint glimmers of hope that exist in what we do. And that's something that I've tried to do. So in the interviews that I've done and in the posts that I've made over recent weeks, I've tried to point out that even though things look very grim into the immediate future, it's not yet a done deal, and things still could go either way. It really is down to how humanity as a collective responds to this, whether it just rolls over and takes the tyranny that's being imposed on us, or whether it treats it as the greatest opportunity we've ever had in this timeline to finally realize that this control system that presides over us is evil, seeks to enslave us, and has nothing good for us, and it needs to go. We need to take back our
power.
Those.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, and this is the best opportunity we've had to do that.
Yeah. It's time to do that, and I totally agree with both of you. But here's what I see happening. A number of doctors, including one I had on the show last week, Dr. Apokaitis, have talked about exactly what you're saying. Like, this is the propaganda, the fear pushing is way too much. It's gone completely out of control. There's other doctors saying like, this stuff don't make sense. We have people in our community that are in medicine that say a lot of the stuff doesn't make sense. So I think it should be obvious to most people now that when we can get on a radio show without, being in the government or having all of these ties to these corporations and stuff and talk about this rationally, and they're not, that's a problem, because we're not getting anything. I don't hear this discussion on any news channel or anything like that. I just hear a lot of, they act like they're so certain about everything, and that's what really bothers me. Yeah,
it's the absolute, the absolutism in the conversation. That's part of the problem that I have. That's why I think most of this, from a media standpoint, is psychological warfare, and it's meant to destroy morale, to coerce people into a position where they're tired of arguing, they're tired of fighting, they're confused, so they give up, and then they don't respond, and they end up consenting to the quote-unquote solution to whatever the problem might be, which is distance yourself until 2021. You have to have a vaccine in order to go out in public again. And you'll notice that from the top down, now that the president has pulled the funding from the World Health Organization, that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is the primary funder. And everything Bill Gates has said, he said we need to have immunity papers. Then here comes Dr. Fauci. We need immunity papers. Then Bill Gates says you can't leave your house until you get a vaccine, or we can't congregate again until you have a vaccine. Then here comes Dr. Fauci, same thing. And now the governors are saying the same thing. So you have unelected billionaires like Bill Gates that seem to be running the global response to the coronavirus, be it real, be it a hoax, be it whatever you want to call it. We're confusing ourselves and arguing with other people that we might otherwise agree with, or at least respect their point of view, while the solution to these problems, perceived or otherwise, are being implemented, and we're accepting and acquiescing to them based on personal beliefs and ideologies. I think we all need, again, a little bit of context, and that's why we can't reduce things to talking points and sound bites. We have to have these conversations like you're saying, Joe.
Yeah, context. When was context too much to ask? It's almost like nowadays, just to get that, it's like pulling teeth. Everything has to be so polarized and so dramatic, either or, and we can't get down to the real problem. But I will say this, I'm with Mark on this one. It'll be a cold day in hell before they force me to have any vaccines. I'll be right back.
The call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. If you would like to text, you can text in at 501-777-5631.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Rupe. Tonight, Mark Devlin is our guest tonight, as well as we have Ryan Gable on for a moment. We're discussing what's going on in the zeitgeist of this COVID-19 deal. We'll also get into Devlin's research and his work about the music industry as well. If you want to call in, just wait till the second part, and that call-in number is 1-800-588-0335, and you can always join the Fringe FM chat room by going to thefringe.fm/chat room. And you can support us on Patreon, too, if you go to patreon.com/LTV radio. So here's the thing I wanted to start this off with. If anybody has a half-wit of a brain now, and you can do your research on these vaccines or this inner needle injection stuff that's supposed to be under the skin, and, you know, they make it sound so beautiful, and they're talking about forcing this kind of thing. Is there a way, and I know you were talking about this during the break, and I love talking about solutions, Mark. Is there a way that we can do this without causing, you know, any chaos or any disruption, where we can just like legally say, you know, no, I don't want your vaccine, right? Is there a way that we can do that now, you think?
Well, a few people have been talking to me about this, and it's been pointed out that mandatory vaccinations would contravene the Nuremberg Code and are a violation of Article 6 of the UNESCO 2005 Statement on Bioethics and Human Rights. So that's worth people knowing. That's a couple of things that you can recite whereby vaccines would contravene these. I've taken advice from a number of people as well that look into legal issues and this legalese and maritime law, you know, this kind of language that's used in courts to trick and deceive everyone. It's like a completely different world to the one that we think goes on in these places. It's all trickery. And people have advised that the best way to deal with being told you have to take a vaccine, compulsory, is to conditionally accept. So you don't say no, you say, well, I will take your vaccine, but these are my conditions. And then you make it clear what your conditions are by way of a written document. I've got one here. Somebody sent me this document the other day, which I've printed off, and I'm going to take this out with me every time I go now, should it ever be needed. And in the list of conditions, you're saying things like, you will agree, this is whoever administers the vaccine to you, that if this vaccine causes any physical harm to me, then you accept that you will be completely financially viable for any damages caused, and you agree to pay those damages. You're also agreeing that the vaccine does not contain any of these harmful toxic ingredients, and you can list them, such as thimerosal, mercury, formaldehyde, aborted fetus tissue, and chick embryos, and all this other horrific stuff they put into vaccines, which is well known. And so you say to the person, if you're prepared to sign this document and accept my conditions, then I'll take your vaccine. And of course, nobody is going to agree to those kind of conditions, particularly the one about being financially viable for any damages caused. And that seems to be the most effective way of getting yourself out of this, from what people have told me. That, and quoting how somebody trying to force a vaccination on you would violate those two codes that I mentioned.
Okay, and just real quick, and then I'll get to you too, Ryan, is now if they do that, and this is what we all know that's coming in some form or fashion because they've discussed it, that's fine. Let's just do devil's advocate here, and I say, well, that's fine about your conditions, but here's what I'm telling you, is that without that vaccination and without an immunization card, you're not going to be able to get anything from any store, any public thing, put your children in school, go out to these public places. So those are our conditions. Then then what do we do then? Because I believe that's what they're really trying to do. They're trying to force this multi-trillion-dollar industry, and I'm just exaggerating with numbers here, down our throats, because this is what it's all about.
Well, then the time has come to either look at a number of us organising ourselves into self-sustainable communities where we're no longer reliant upon the state for anything. So those who are willing to be a part of it get together and live off grid and, grow our own food and just take care of the needs of the community in that sense. It's either that, which is something I've never had to consider doing before, but I am seriously looking at it now, or it's time to rise up in our mass numbers and say, we are not taking this anymore. And if enough of us did that, if enough of us came together, stood shoulder to shoulder for the sake of humanity itself and said, enough now, enough, we're taking no more. And we're all united on this. What are you going to do about it? What could the small number that are driving this whole agenda do if hundreds of thousands, or better yet, millions, stood up and said, we're not taking this anymore? And I've been calling out for this, imploring humanity to do just that for many years already, before things even got this bad. Now, if this is not the line in the sand where we do that, I don't know how much worse it can get. So I like to think that if it got to the stage where the tyranny was so blatant that they were saying, we are going to put this product into your body against your will, otherwise you will not be able to exist in society, is that not the line in the sand? Have things not gone far enough then? What do we have to lose by that point in rising up and resisting?
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that, man. Like, there needs to be some passion for the human race. There needs to be people that will stand up and not just give in to the fear and say, well, there's no point in fighting. That's the thing that really gets me, guys, is that gets me to this point. We both live in countries where people have just done everything in their power, like armies of people have died, and just if you go into history, it's insane what had to happen for us to have this type of life and these types of free lives that we have. And it's not really free because they've been slowly making us cattle over time, but it was at one time, right? And these people had passion. They were willing to stand up for what they believed in and what they loved, and they had spirit. And this is not what I see nowadays. I see, and I hate to be doom and gloom about this, but it's kind of like WALL-E, where, the next thing that's going to come out are these wheelchairs that have screens that are right in our faces, and we just eat fast food and we don't have to get up, and they'll just provide everything for us. I'm not saying everybody's that way, but we've lost a lot of passion for our own freedoms and liberties. There's no doubt about it. I totally believe that. I'm with you on that. Ryan, no, go ahead, Mark. You going to say something on that?
Well, I was just going to say there have been many points in history where people have had to come together and unite to throw off tyranny and to throw off threats to their safety and their freedom and their rights. And unfortunately, we appear to be in one of those now. None of us saw it coming. I mean, 5 weeks ago, I was just living my life normally, as everyone in the UK was, just going about our business and doing what we always did. And here we are 5 weeks later with an unbelievable situation. Life is just completely different now. And we're in the same situation as people have been in at so many points in the human timeline, where they've had to throw off their oppressors by going to war. And we are going to have to go to war. I mean, not literally in terms of tanks and guns, but it is a war because our very freedoms are at stake. And what could be more worth fighting for than that? Our backs are against the wall. And when your backs are against the wall, you either just stand there and take it, or you fight back. And we have to reluctantly accept that we're in that situation, and we have no reasonable choice but to fight back now.
Absolutely. Man, well said. And Ryan, as someone that thinks this is extremely rational and as logical as you do, and really does your research on these types of things, I mean, I don't know anybody else that I'm friends with personally that does journalism the way you do. I mean, you take everything down to the written document and keep them in folders and files, and that's fantastic. So what I'm trying to figure out, I guess what I would ask you is that from a rational point of view, or from your point of view based on your information and research, what do you think is really going on with this? Or is it you don't know? You really don't know yet?
I think I don't know, and I don't think I ever will know, or anybody will ever fully know. But I think from my perspective, in my opinion, I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me, that this is a complex situation. Like any situation is complex, but understanding that it's complex allows us to recognize the simplicity of the situation. And the simplicity, in my view, of the situation is that it's not black and white. It's not some evil cabal, in my view, that's organized around Bill Gates trying to kill the entire world's population. I think that there are people that are in government and in businesses that are taking advantage of this situation all over the world, and they're doing that maybe to better, their communities, perhaps through emergency orders by their perspective, and some are doing it because they're on power trips, and some are doing it because they feel like it's the right thing to do because they're taking orders from authorities, whether they're local officials or state officials or even federal officials. The fact that it's not so simplistic in the sense that it's not black and white, when you suggest that to somebody who either believes the official narrative or who believes the very opposite of the official narrative, I think that's difficult to comprehend if you look at things in a very polarizing way. And so if I was to suggest, well, I don't necessarily believe the official version of events, I certainly do not, but I don't necessarily believe whatever these alternative conspiracy theories are either. I want to look at things as it is as possible as I can objectively, and that isn't necessarily popular because it's not a hashtag, it's not a talking point, it's not some soundbite. But that's where we're going to find a better understanding through the context of the information, whether it's something somebody said or it's, for example, Bill Gates. People say, well, Bill Gates wants to implant microchips in your brain. Well, unless there's some study or document or something he funded that he said that, I've never seen that. What I've seen is that they've funded for children, they funded the Band-Aid-like microneedle quantum dye tattoos, which are similar to the MIT DARPA biostamps. And that's similar to other technologies that Microsoft has patented for cryptocurrency and digital surveillance. But that's part of the game of telephone. It's like, well, Bill Gates funded this. And then by the time the conversation makes it down to the end of the table, it's like, well, Bill Gates wants to inject microchips into your bloodstream and into your brain. And then that is used by mainstream media to further discredit the alternative and the independent because we don't look at things for what they are. We hear what we want to hear and we take off with it. And again, it's like a game of telephone. By the time it gets down to the end of the table, it's something totally different and it turns into a straw man. So then people that are in disagreement and have their own beliefs and ideologies and dogmas will use that as evidence and proof that you are incorrect and don't know what you're talking about. And then they diminish and destroy any alternative point of view and any ultimately critical thinking and free thought, which is the most important thing to maintain through this or any other situation. So to answer your question in terms of what's really going on, I think a lot of things are going on. I think there are really, really evil people. I think Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci are very, very evil men. And I think there are people that are taking advantage of the situation, whether they're officials in government or people that choose to stay home because they feel like they need a vacation and they're happy with it. But even I think those people at some point are realizing there's no point to life if I'm just sitting here watching Netflix 24 hours a day. I want to go back to work and I want to produce something because that's ultimately the driving force of the human spirit.
Right, man. That very well said. And Mark, that's the thing like that I totally agree with. And what you're talking about is I think there's this idea that some people, and I've experienced this with my own father, Mark, that they do not believe that there are people out there that are that diabolical, that Bill Gates would never do something like that, that a human being would not do bad things to mass murder people in a discreet way, and it's not really a murder. In their eyes, it's more of like some type of opportunity to get their agendas done. But what I'm saying is the idea that we believe, and that there are people out there that believe that there are no super evil humans out there that would just do these crazy things, and that we make all this up in our heads about diabolical schemes and evil plots and all kinds of things. is maddening to me. I mean, JFK talked about it and they shot him for it. Yet when I talk about it to certain people, especially people of an older generation, they refuse to believe that that exists on the planet for some reason, that humans could do that to each other. What are your thoughts on that?
There are two phrases you so often hear. One is, the government would never do that. And the other is, and even if they did, the mainstream media would tell us about it, which just speaks to the naivety of so many people still who believe that the government and the mainstream media are on their side. What I have to remember is that I've been on this path now for 10 years. So in 2010, I woke up, air quotes, and started to see the world for what it really was. And it was the books of David Icke that helped me largely in that process, just really absorbing all the information that he put out and applying it to what I saw going on around me. And that set me off on the path to my own research. So that led to the publication of Musical Truth Volume 1, where I just threw myself into researching the true nature of the corporate music industry and who really owns and controls it. So I've been on this path for 10 years, and it's become my world. Most people that I correspond with on social media, most people that I meet socially, or used to when we could actually meet people socially, meetup groups and conferences, and personal friends of mine are truth seekers, are people that, you know, largely see the world the same way that I do. And I have to remind myself so often that most people are not in that mind state. And I myself was not in that mind state prior to 2010. Back 15 years ago, if this narrative had unfolded then, I may well have bought the official story. So we have to be conscious of the fact that most people have never before thought or had reason to question the official version of anything. Now, if this event doesn't change that in large numbers of people, then I don't know what ever will. So I really hope that this is going to be an opportunity for people to see that things are just not adding up. Just what we were talking about earlier, how the government is telling us that this isolation that we must all undergo, social distancing, and keeping ourselves away from people, is for our own good as a collective. It's to stop the spread of this deadly virus, they tell us. Stay home, save lives is the mantra we get here. But look at the damage that it's causing in terms of how many suicides do we think have taken place as a result of people just being so utterly depressed at being stuck in the house and not being able to have social contact with anyone? Maybe these people were getting counselling sessions one-to-one, and now they can't do that. It's just not the same doing it over a screen on bloody Skype. How many people with mental health issues have had those exacerbated? How many kids are just going out of their minds with boredom because they're not able to connect socially with other kids, which is an essential part of their development? What about the economy? How many people have lost their jobs? How many people have lost their businesses? How many people have lost elderly relatives? Maybe their parents have been taken into hospital. They've been told they can't go and see them to say goodbye. It's absolutely devastating what's being done, and it's out of all proportion to what we're told the problem is. That alone tells you the government does not care about you, does not have your best interests at heart. And I really hope this event is going to wake many people up to that, particularly if they've been affected in one of those direct personal ways that I just mentioned. So I would really like to be wrong about this. I would love to be wrong about all the things that I've said and that many other researchers have said over the course of the past 10 years plus about the fact that this world is not run by the people you think it is. Donald Trump is not in charge of America. Boris Johnson is not in charge of Britain. They have higher-ups that they answer to who are directing all these events. The true power cabal of this world. I would love to be wrong about all that. I've got no ego investment, because if I'm wrong about all that, it means that things aren't as bad as I've been saying, and that there's so much more optimism and hope for humanity. But unfortunately, all the signs point to the fact that I and many others are absolutely correct in saying that we have this power-mad group who are at their root core dark occultists, and they adhere to dark occult ritual and twisted religious belief systems which dictate many of their events. That is the truth of the matter, and this latest event is just yet more proof of who is really running this world.
And this is something that I want to get into in the second half here with you, is about some of your research as well too on this, because it's and, ask you some questions about your story. I don't know if, Ryan, are you staying or you have to go or what's going on here, buddy? I just wanted you to come on and talk to us while we had you. And just kind of pick your brain on this, because honestly, there's been a lot of things that this isn't like my point. There's been a lot of things that Ryan and I disagree on, and we get on here and we talk about it. We have a discussion, and we don't, go to ad hominem or name calling or any of that stuff. And we kind of just work things out amongst ourselves. And you can't, if you don't see that in the media, then there's a real problem there. And I think that what I would like to see and what I would hope that happens is that we don't get too frustrated. And I know both of you are just as frustrated as I am, but you have to consider, and I'll talk to you about this first, Ryan, that some people just have not done the research that you've done, and they kind of lead with their emotions first. And I try to have compassion for that, but now I'm finding myself frustrated, and it does kind of make you want to, in some way give up and just kind of do your own thing. And not, when I say give up, Ryan, understand that I mean like not give up on everyone in humanity, but give up on trying to explain yourself. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, if you understand that certain triggers and stimulations will target those emotions, then people become easily malleable and manipulated. So rather than focusing on some arbitrary number of those we consider to be older than us, which is different for everybody, maybe we should look towards younger people, and we should look at teaching kids critical thinking. And kind of like what George Carlin said, parents don't teach their kids that because they wouldn't want their kids questioning their own BS in the house. Well, parents need their kids to question their own BS. I hope my son makes me sound stupid. I hope my son blows my brain away, because I want him to be able to question everything that I say to keep me in check, just as much as I want my audience on The Secret Teachings to keep me in check. And if I disagree, I'll say I disagree. So critical thinking is an important element to this, because it allows you to address any situation. I don't care if it's food. I don't care if it's COVID-19 or if it's something relating to aliens, anything. It all has to come back to critical thinking, because that's the one tool that's necessary without bias and with as much objectivity as one can possibly utilize. That needs to be the key element, the key tool for us to move forward in any kind of investigation. The other thing is, psychotic behavior is not something that a lot of us can understand. If you're an investigator, you kind of have to put your mind into a position where you can understand what the psychopath is thinking. You have to be like a profiler, criminal profiler, to get an idea of what the person's thinking, what their next move is going to be. If you can do that, you might be a little bit psychotic yourself, but if you're able to balance that out with some form of morality and virtue and integrity, then you can use that as a tool to follow the pattern and see where these people, whomever they might be, and a lot of them we know the names, where they are attempting to take us, or where this quote-unquote dark agenda is trying to take us. Another thing that is really important is, and this is just a really simple question that we should ask, it could be about fifth generational technology, which is bad, but so is fourth generational technology. Any kind of microwave like this, the satellites and the Wi-Fi from the Skynet system of Elon Musk and others. Do you really think telecommunications companies are spending billions of dollars, that they're launching satellites and that they're spending all this time and money, all this energy, so that you can, by their own statements, the best argument they can come up with so that they can provide you with faster download speeds? I don't think so. No. And the other two things I want to mention, Joe, are that if you have the United Nations, some fraction thereof, saying that this lockdown is going to lead to potentially 130 million additional people starving to death, there being massive famines. They've already had problems in Africa and across the Middle East with locusts. Now they're going to have potentially massive famines, 130 million people die. And the fact that Bill Gates himself, I played the audio on my show, a lot of people have played it, said that if we vaccinate 7 billion people, 1 in 10,000, that's 700,000 or more, are going to have adverse effects, and i.e. die of the vaccine, which is, even if you took the official number of people who have died and it was not inflated, which we know that it is, that would mean that over 500 or so thousand people more would die with a vaccine than without a vaccine, which even for the common flu won't protect you. And the last thing I think is really important to tie this together and bring us into the next segment so that you can talk with Mark about his research is whether it's Microsoft and Bill Gates, or we're talking about more dark, shadowy forces, call it a dark agenda. I find it interesting, and I did a show on this last week called the Abramovich Paradox, that through the HoloLens virtual reality they call it mixed reality now, the mixed reality headset that Microsoft has, they run a commercial in the middle of all of this with Marina Abramovich, who appears as the Scarlet Lady of Aleister Crowley inside of a magical circle. She appears as Elon Musk described the summoning of artificial intelligence, as a demon. That's what he said about AI. It's like summoning a demon. And so the solution now to contact tracing with Google and Apple and the communist Chinese model that most Western companies help build, it's all part of the same network, it seems, is to utilize AI to track and to trace everything that people do. So we've summoned artificial intelligence, and that element and those archetypes and that symbolism is all throughout popular culture, and it's all throughout the entertainment industry as part of a system, I believe, to slowly and incrementally corrupt and coerce the public into accepting things that they otherwise wouldn't accept.
Fantastic. Excuse me. Thank you for saying that, Ryan. Very well said, man. Thank you. And I really appreciate you coming on and spending this time with us here. And yes, when we come back, I do want to speak with Mark and talk about his research and get into his story, which is something that I think a lot, that will, especially for our audience, the Void Walkers here, where you can see just what's going on with the music industry, what's going on and has been going on for some time. So we can get out of this idea that there are no truly evil people that are that diabolical, that do things that crazy and plan things out this long, because they most definitely do. And they use the occult for their own purposes. We'll be right back.
Phone, dial 1-800-588-0335, toll free from the United States or Canada. You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. Pretty interesting night. I have a guest on I've always wanted to talk to. The one and only Mark Devlin is here with us. And Ryan Gable is also here. He's just going to kind of hang out, and if something takes his fancy, he's probably going to chime in, which is fine with me. And I want to get into your story, Mark, but before we do that, I've got the phone lines open here, and we have a caller from 714 area code. Real quick, let's take that call. You're on the air with Mark Devlin, who he's speaking with.
I don't hear you, but no, this is Prince Lucid,
okay.
AKA.
Yeah,
I don't hear you, but I definitely want to say.
Yeah, what's your question?
Well, it's not a question. Just want to thank you and Ryan for doing what you guys are doing. You guys are on the front lines of information. I mean, you're showing us and you're giving us venue to be out there to actually talk about this kind of thing.
Yeah, man. Well, you're very welcome. I appreciate you calling in to say that. It's totally worth to hear that. And, you know, before the break, actually, Mark was talking about that. He was saying, and I don't know if you could hear us during the break because I think I turned your monitor down, but he was saying that we do need more people to be, you know, on the front lines too, but we also need more people to bring people into their own power and bring up their spirits. And yeah, so I appreciate you saying that, man. Thanks for calling in and saying that.
No worries, man. You have a good night.
You too. Prince Lucid from the Fringe FM chat. Yeah, he's been there for quite a while too. So I really do appreciate you listening, man. Sorry about the technical stuff there. So, Mark, you know, earlier you were talking about 10 years ago that you you were just living a normal life, and then one day you woke up and put you on the journey that you've been on now as far as your research is considered. If you don't mind, I know you've probably told this story, but as for my audience, I'd kind of like to hear just a brief breakdown of what happened.
Sure. Well, it was 2010, September, and I was on a trip to the US. I was going to New York, and I was also going to Niagara Falls. So I spent some time in Buffalo. And I had David Icke's newest book with me, Human Race, Get Off Your Knees. And my life was as busy then as it is now, but back then I was doing a whole load of DJ gigs and radio shows. I wasn't doing any of this type of stuff. And that trip gave me the opportunity during the time that I spent on the flights and sitting around in airports to read that book. And it just felt like all the pieces to a jigsaw puzzle had been put together, and I could suddenly see the big picture. It wasn't just that event. There had been a couple of years leading up to it where I had started to question the true nature of this world, because I was looking around me and I was seeing injustice and just things that just made no sense. Why were countries always at war? Why was there always a war somewhere in the world? Why was there so much inequality between the rich and the poor? Why did politicians take decisions that didn't seem to favor the people? So I'd had these questions running around my mind, and it all kind of coalesced and came together and made sense in 2010. And it really changed me. Immediately, I just threw myself furiously into research. I wanted to know so much more about these secret society groups that supposedly ran things in every aspect of society. So started researching all of that. And I really wanted to know how this tied into the corporate music industry that I'd been a part of. And that became my specialist area of research. So 5 years worth of looking into all of that led to the publication of Musical Truth Volume 1 in 2016. And in that, I was discussing all kinds of things like the military intelligence connections to the music industry, which you wouldn't necessarily expect to find, but you do everywhere. When you look at the early record labels that put out some of the prominent artists in the early days, like Elvis Presley, the Beatles, and so many others, you find connections going into the world of the military. Also in that book, I discussed mind control programming, trauma-based mind control, MK Ultra and Monarch programming, and all the different splinters of that whole thing. I discussed the idea of demonic possession and ritual sacrifice. So we're really going deep there. But one of the main subjects that I discussed in that book was how the network of groups and secret societies and dark occultists that run every aspect of this world are all interconnected with each other. So one of the subject areas in the book involved what's known as predictive programming. And this is where depictions of an event which is known to be coming. And this can either be an event which actually happens, or it can be a hoax event where the public is mind controlled into believing it really happened, but in actual fact it was a put-up job. It doesn't really matter, because those driving the narrative, the architects of it, want the public to believe a particular thing. And to prepare them psychologically for it, they put depictions of the event that is known to be coming into works of popular culture, like movies, TV shows, music videos, record sleeves, that kind of thing. So I've got a whole chapter documenting on how that whole thing works. 9/11 is the classic example. There were so many representations of what happened on September 11th, 2001 in the years and decades leading up to it in those works of popular culture. And when it comes to the current COVID-19 coronavirus situation, there are many, many more. Now, the only way depictions of these events could be so accurately foreshadowed years before they actually happen is if ultimately the same forces that control these popular culture vehicles like Hollywood movies and the music industry are connected with those parties that are making these events happen. And that's a really good illustration of how this world is really organized, and how a very small number of individuals working through groups, working through secret society mystery schools in many cases, working through social engineering think tanks like the Bilderberg Group and the Council of Foreign Relations and the Club of Rome and the Trilateral Commission and all these different groups dictate everything that happens. So, you know, we can go into some individual examples, but the only way you could explain it otherwise is by saying it's all a big coincidence. And when you have example after example after example, and each time you're going to make the claim that, oh, it's just a coincidence, the odds of it becoming just a coincidence are probably into the trillions to one. So, you're either undergoing a huge amount of denial, or you have to begrudgingly accept that there's something going on here and the world is not like we thought it was. And that's the path I've been on for the last 10 years. That's my normal every day. And like I said earlier, I have to keep reminding myself that not everyone is on that path.
Yeah, it does get a little frustrating. I got to be honest with you, too, because, what I always wondered about this when it comes to you and, Ryan and people, I would say that have studied the occult, but I don't know if you practice it or not, but I've found like magic in my life to be a good and powerful thing that's brought me a lot of beauty and love in my life. And yet I do see the dark sides of it and how it's been used against people. And I just want to clear the air here, because a lot of people respect you when it comes to matters of the magic and the occult. And, we only say those words because it's a hidden thing that we don't understand. We just know that it kind of works and we understand the psychology of it and all that. Do you carry a viewpoint, and forgive me if I haven't done my research enough, but I do have to ask, do you carry a viewpoint that it's the occult and magic are evil things or bad things?
The occult is neutral in its base state. The occult means, the word means hidden or veiled from public view. So it's comprehensions of the connection between the spirit world and the material world and the interactions between them, and the existence of energy in its many different forms and how it can be manipulated according to the will and the intent of the practitioner. So if the practitioner has benevolent aims in mind and wants to uplift and enrich humanity, or if they want to do that on a personal basis, then they can harness the powers of magic for those benevolent means. But the opposite also has to be true. And if the practitioner has the enslavement and subjugation of all of humanity in mind, and they want to use natural, spiritual, metaphysical forces to achieve those aims, and that's the will that they apply to it, then that's going to happen. The universe responds to the will and the intent of the user, which means if a large number of people want to steer the workings of this reality off down an evil path, it will facilitate that, because we have free will as humans. It's our greatest gift. And that can, of course, be abused by evil people, and has been throughout history. But until I got on this path 10 years ago, Joe, I'll tell you, I was an atheist. I've been through different stages in my life. I grew up going to a Christian school where we learned all about Jesus and the Bible, but it never really made any effect on me. And I then kind of drifted through my teenage years and my young adult years. And I had an experience when I was about 20 years old, which caused me to believe that I'd become a born-again Christian. And I attended a church for 4 years. And at the end of it, I left that church situation having been turned into an atheist because of all the contradictions and all the hypocrisy that I believed I'd seen within those groups. And so I was quite a bitter atheist, and I held that worldview all the way up until my awakening in 2010. Very shortly after that, when I threw myself into all this research, I came to realize that absolutely there is a higher power. Absolutely there is a creator. Absolutely we are spirits in a material world. And when you look at all the esoteric and metaphysical knowledge that comes through these different secret societies, like the Freemasons or the Rosicrucians or the Jesuits or any other group you might care to mention, I think at the core of it, even though they dress it up differently and they put different interpretations on it, that knowledge all boils down to an understanding of the interactions between the spirit world and the material, the physical world, and how to harness that and how to utilize it. And I think that Freemasonry, as an example, when that started out, it probably did come with noble intent, and the early members of that fraternity were using their esoteric metaphysical knowledge for good, for the upliftment of others.
That's right.
And humanity as a whole. But clearly, at some point in the timeline, that vehicle was hijacked by dark occultists who wanted to turn it down a very evil road. And now Freemasonry has got a pretty bad name in alternative research circles because it's seen as a vehicle for, enslavement and all kinds of evil doing. But I don't think it started out that way. And it's the same with many of these ancient religious systems like paganism. When you go back to the early days of that, paganism in its early form was about veneration of nature, a celebration of nature and of the sun and of the passing of the seasons, and embracing that and fully interacting with that. But at some point, again, that knowledge has clearly been tapped into and steered off and hijacked, and now all that stuff is used for very evil means by dark occultists. So that's the situation that we have going on now, I think, and it's been the case for a very long time.
And this is something that I often struggle with myself, honestly, because I take a Rosicrucian mentality about a lot of things, and I would say probably a Hermetic Rosicrucian, maybe scientific mentality about a lot of this, and it's really cool to hear you say that, because you are respected in the community. A lot of people, just like, they follow your work as well as Ryan's work, and it's very nice to hear people say that, because I think that we're in a time right now where people need to kind of look at this information, like you say, and say, well, it's obvious that this is going on. I mean, Ryan and Clyde do a Super Bowl show every year where you can kind of see how people are using it all the time. And even if it's on a minute psychological level, it's definitely working. And it's time that we step into our own power. And I personally believe that until people get down and study the occult and study the hidden meanings behind all of these things and open their mind up to say, well, maybe the history and spirituality that I was taught and raised up with, just for a moment, let's say that it could be wrong. Let's say that there's more to it. If there's anything that we should do in isolation, I believe it's that consciousness exploration and what you're saying, a realization that we need to wake up and see that this stuff's been going on for a while now, but you said something earlier.
I'd like to get even deeper on that, if you'll allow me.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, one of the things that I came to a comprehension of quite a while back, and people may disagree with me on this, but it's my viewpoint that in spirit soul form, before we incarnate into these human bodies, we consent to come to this place, this physical reality, and undergo these life experiences. So we're not forced into these bodies. We volunteer for it. I've studied many spiritual teachers and listened to their viewpoints, and this makes sense to me, and I have a profound inner standing of this, it seems to me. So what that means is that each of us here in this time chose to be here. We chose to undergo these experiences. Now, I know you can look around at all the darkness in the world, and you can consider all the problems and all the suffering that people undergo, and from the point of view of a human mind, the limited viewpoint of a human mind, you might say, why would anyone choose to undergo this? Why the hell would you do that? But like I say, you're addressing that from the limited viewpoint of a human mind. When we're in our original spirit form, we're coming from a much higher level of consciousness and holistic intelligence. We can see the bigger picture. So we might make the decision to come into this reality and undergo a particular life because our soul needs to learn certain lessons and undergo certain experiences to enrich it on its journey. And then when you leave these bodies and go back to source, you take all that knowledge and all that wisdom that you've accumulated with you back to source, and you pool it with all the other wisdom and knowledge that's been gleaned by everyone else that's come into this place. So if I'm correct in this, it would mean that everyone alive in the world today chose to come here to be a part of the events we're now experiencing, because there's something we wish to get out of it for our own development and growth, or there's something we wish to contribute to the bigger picture in terms of our input. So, like I say, many people might disagree with me on that, but that's the way I'm viewing this situation. And it occurred to me just recently that this is the moment of my life. And the reason I got on this path of research, and the reason I have the background that I have and I developed the skill set that I had, is so that at this point in the timeline, I could step up and make my contribution to things. And everyone else will have a contribution to make as well.
Man, I totally agree with that. You don't see it when it's happening though, do you? You don't see how it's all coming together. You really don't.
You have to keep reminding yourself of it.
Yeah.
So I have conversations with what people would call God every day. I just go for a walk and take that quiet time and just try and connect back to source, and just get that connection going. Because when you're going through these human experiences, the last thing on your mind is, man, I really wanted this. This is just what I need right now, because it doesn't feel like what you want and need. So I have to keep reminding myself that all of this stuff is happening for a reason. And again, it comes down to free will. Nothing is a done deal. I don't believe anything is written in stone in terms of the way things will play out. It's down to the choices that we all make and how wise we are, how courageous we are, how intelligent we are in terms of what we apply to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It totally makes sense, because that's exactly every job that I worked up to what I'm doing now. I couldn't stand, man. There was something about, I thought that I was being punished, and I was like, well, if I asked to be here, then why am I going through this and all, but there's all this, I see it now, just like you're talking about. Every skill that you developed made you into who you are right now. And now you're this voice that a lot of people listen to. And it's, and I like your approach too, because you come from a point of view that's very direct and very passionate, and that's good. There's a lot of intellect out there, sure. And we can all do our own research and stuff, but to have spirit and fire and passion behind it and true compassion and emotion for people is another thing. That's a whole other thing. And right now, I think a lot of us are being treated as if we're, in G-Bay. I mean, what do you think isolation does and all kinds of depression? That we're being treated that just like we were prisoners or terrorists. And I know that's a little extreme, but that's what it does to the psyche, Yeah.
We're being held in collective punishment. That's what it is. And yet we're told that our governments care about us and just want what's best for us. So, yeah, it was a case of all three of us on this show right now obviously developed skills as radio presenters and interviewers and researchers. And I think all of that was leading up to this point, because all three of us are needed right now. We need to contribute the skill sets that we've got. It would have been the same for Ryan, who's a phenomenal presenter and, expresses things very well. And, it's all leading up to where we are now.
And so would you say that a lot of people need to not bury that light that's inside of them? When I grew up, I went to church. There was this song talking about this little light of mine, and it's a cute song, right? But it's true. There's a lot of stuff that comes in our lives that tries to bury us and that spirit that's in us, that creativity and that spark and that passion. And some people do it to us, even our loved ones, and all kinds of things come against us that we feel like that we can't be that person. And I think right now there is a call for all of us to step into just, I guess, a bigger power in ourselves and understand that there's something in there, But like you said, too, I also believe that if they don't make that choice, that it's all going to come down to where it's supposed to happen anyways. I really do believe that.
Yeah, I think it's an interplay between certain things which were always destined to happen. So I think it's no accident who you end up with your partner in life. It's no accident if you end up with children in life. It was always meant that, those children were going to be yours. But when it comes to the finer detail in terms of how certain situations play out, that's where the free will comes in. So it could go either way. It depends on the applied consciousness and intent of the individuals involved in it. So some things are a done deal, but many things aren't, in my view.
And if you don't mind me asking, how many children do you have?
Well, I have 2 children, and I muse on this quite a lot as well, because the situation we're in now, if I didn't have children, if I was a single man, I'd never got married, I had no partner, if the only person I had to worry about in my own life was me, then I would be handling this situation very differently, I think. I would be much more gung-ho, devil may care about the way I conduct myself. I would take many more risks than I do now. I think the fact that I have a family to take care of keeps me to a certain extent grounded and keeps me sensible in decisions that I make, because
makes you get in the car and rant instead of in front of the children, right? Yeah.
Well, there's that. I mean, first of all, I don't even know if I would still be here if I didn't have kids. I may well have done myself in by this point. So the fact that I have kids that I'm responsible for has kept me around. And then, like I say, I would be taking far more risks in my behaviors. I have to temper the way I conduct myself in certain situations because I've got a family that needs me. And the fact that I've got 2 young daughters that are going to have to grow up in this nightmare world that's unfolding around us is incredibly motivational for me in trying to make sure it doesn't get as dark as it could, and to ensure that the future is actually one worth living for all our kids.
Man, I couldn't agree more. Fantastic. All right, look, Mark Devlin's here with us. We got one more part of the show left, so if you do want to get your questions in, call in numbers 1-800-588-0335. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Lighting the Void. The call-in number is 1-800-588-0335.
Well, it's been a compelling night for sure here with Mark Devlin. Also hanging out with us in the background is Ryan Gable, host of The Secret Teachings. After the show, we're probably going to play Freeman, and then Ryan will come on at the same time. But starting next week at 11 p.m. Pacific time, The Secret Teachings will be on instead of midnight Pacific. That way, you'll get 4 hours of broadcasting with us, 2 hours from me and 2 hours from Ryan each night, and he'll come on a little earlier. And I really appreciate Ryan doing that because we've got a lot of upgrades going on with the station and stuff, and I've got to get to bed so I can get to work more. So thank you, Ryan, for doing that. Mark Devlin is our guest tonight, and it has been a real pleasure to be able to speak to you because I've always wanted to talk to you, man. I've been following your work for quite some time. Anybody, like I said before, that has this is well researched in this and that has spirit behind it as well and that believes in the human spirit is still pushing for it is a good thing to me, because right now, for a lot of us, it could be really easy to give up on. And I don't want that to happen either. And earlier I'd mentioned the occult, and I asked you about, a moral question. Was kind of a polar moral question, and I'm glad that you answered it that way because it's kind of neutral. But here's the thing. In the music industry, I wanted to talk to you about this. I noticed that these one-hit wonders would come out. Let's take, and I don't know if it's a one-hit wonder, but let's say like the Blue Oyster Cult. When they came out, it was Don't Fear the Reaper, and they had the magician on the front holding the tarot cards. And they made that song, if you really pay attention to it, almost it seems like they're talking about Saturn or maybe Father Time or, Don't Fear Nature kind of thing. And when they put this catchy kind of hypnotic rhythm to it and then kind of exalted these occult things, then it becomes a hit. Now, I've seen that happen before, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But what I do find that is wrong with the music industry, and maybe Ryan can chime in too after you speak here on this, Mark, is that there are some pretty sadistic stuff that goes on in the music industry, as far as programming's going on, as far as what they're doing psychologically, and the people at the top level. And that's about all I know. But what do you know about it as far as that's concerned?
Well, yeah, and that expresses itself in many different ways. So you have certain songs that have occult lyrics built into them, and to the average listener, a lot of this can just seem very ambiguous and even pretentious because the lyrics seem to make no sense. But in my book, I detail how what's known as witch language is often used, and it's a way of occultists communicating with each other by using certain words and phrases that only make sense in certain contexts. So you get that in songs. You've got the phenomenon of backmasking, which is situations where messages are placed backwards into a recording, and they can only be discerned properly when the recording is played back to front. However, lots of research has shown that on a subliminal level, the human mind can still absorb a message which is relayed backwards, because all the energetic information is there and it's still assembled in the subconscious mind where it can have an effect. Then you've got the ritualistic aspect of shows like the US Super Bowl halftime show. I know Ryan's done endless analysis of many of these, the Grammys, the VMAs, even the Eurovision Song Contest, and maybe we can get into last year's shortly, which involved Madonna, because it ties into the current coronavirus narrative. But these shows are basically massive occult rituals. They're putting Freemasonic imagery out there, they're putting ancient Egyptian symbolism out there, they're putting Satanism and Luciferianism and depictions of Baphomet and all these different entities out there. They're evoking these different demonic entities through some of the artist performances. So the average person watching it thinks it's just this lavish, high-budget, colourful entertainment show, but in actual fact you're having all kinds of dark occult stuff absorbed by your subconscious, where it's having an effect on your mind and your perceptions of things. So that happens. Then you've got certain artists who are occultists in themselves in terms of what they practice behind the scenes. So it expresses itself in many different ways. We've also got this phenomenon of predictive programming, which I alluded to earlier, where you have depictions of real-world events going into things like music shows. The reason that is done is partly to get the public mindset familiar with a narrative that is known to be coming, that's going to be rolled out. So if aspects of this have already been absorbed by the subconscious mind of large numbers of people, the conscious mind is not registering that it's there, but it's there on a subliminal level. So when the news bulletin breaks and you're asked to believe that a particular thing is happening, there's already a certain familiarity of it within you because you've absorbed these different aspects of it, though you're not conscious of it. But the main reason they do this is also known as revelation of the method, or placing the truth in plain sight, is because from the point of view of these sick, twisted occultists and their belief systems, they feel that by giving you a depiction of what is known to be coming, they've given you the opportunity to understand. And when you then don't voice any objection to it, they take your tacit approval as you consenting to this situation that they plan to drop on you. So as far as they're concerned, not saying no is as good as saying yes. And I know that might sound ridiculous to people hearing that concept for the first time. It doesn't really matter whether it sounds ridiculous to you or not. They believe it, they adhere to it, and they work by it the whole time. So they understand that free will and consent are at play in the universe. They understand that natural law or universal law is very real and is very present, and we're all governed by the tenets of it, or the consequences of it, of taking certain behaviors. And they really do believe that they can cheat the karmic consequences that would otherwise come down on them by putting the onus on us and somehow saying that we were told what was coming, we didn't say we weren't okay with it, therefore we agreed to it. So they've done no harm as they see it. These are complicated concepts for people hearing them for the first time, but they tie into natural law, they tie into the Hermetic principles, they tie into the mechanisms that are in place in the universe that govern human behavior and free will choices and consent. So I go into a lot of that in Musical Truth Volume 1 because, believe it or not, all this stuff plays out in the entertainment industry. And the point that I'm making overall is that when we think of popular music or even Hollywood films or TV shows or video games or sports games, anything that we do to unwind and enjoy ourselves when we've got a bit of leisure time and forget all the pressures in our life, we think that entertainment is there just to give us a chance to unwind and relax and have a bit of fun. The last thing on anyone's mind is that when they're listening to a favorite piece of music or watching a film or whatever, they're being mind controlled and they're being socially conditioned to take on certain belief systems, perceptions, prejudices, behaviors, But that's exactly what these vehicles are. And if you accept that this world is really run by networks of dark occultists rather than the groups and the corporations that we think it's run by, then why would they pass up the chance of mind controlling vast numbers of people and getting them exactly where they want them psychologically that are offered through vehicles like the entertainment industry? You know, people love music. Everyone's got a favorite group, a favorite band, a favorite musician. These people are elevated to godlike status. They become icons. They become heroes to people. Now, if those individuals are controlled, ultimately, and are adhering to certain narratives in the way they put themselves forward, that is an unbelievable way of getting into the mentality of huge numbers of people all over the world without them having any inkling that it's going on.
Yeah. And do you find that it's super, that's what's one of those things to you that's super frustrating is, I think, well, I'll say to me, because I don't want to put that on you, because I see this as a thing that could empower us, but even in TV shows, and look, I'm not one of those people that are just totally against every TV show that talks about occultism, but in the news shows, it's like Sabrina and all, it's not Bewitched anymore. They're putting actual occult symbolism and, you know, skewing statues, and the whole idea of Baphomet has been just totally destroyed from since Eliphas Levi. There's so many things that I feel like that we cannot go back on no matter what, you know.
Perversion now, Joe.
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't even call it a cult. I would just call it perversion of sacred symbols and sacred concepts.
And it's the same thing of what you're talking about. You mentioned Freemasonry, Mark, earlier, and I grew up in a family, because I'm Southern, full of Freemasons, and we have Freemasons here that are rampant in the South. There's a lot of history here, and I was going to get into it myself because I read, you know, books like Mackey and Pike and Manly P. Hall and Massey and all these people that I really admired their research. But when I got involved with this thing, it was definitely, it's almost hard to talk about because it broke my spirit. It was definitely not the way that it was meant to be. There was all about the good old boy system. It was almost like a government within the government. And then you realize that our government has been kind of structured the way that these guys structured this ancient society. And it really starts to freak you out after a while, to be honest with you.
Yeah. There's parallels there with the way the music industry is structured as well, which is almost like a secret society in itself. So you find the only artists that ever make it to household name status, where they become so familiar that pretty much everyone in the world has heard of them. When you look at how they got to that position, you're supposed to believe that they got there just through sheer chance and good luck and working really hard and doing a bit of networking, doing a bit of hobnobbing in the industry, crossing their fingers for good luck, and they just happen to become these massive superstars and celebrities. But when you really delve into their background, you find that there are really a couple of ways how they get there. One is down to family bloodlines. And this is a very interesting area of research. When you look at the ancestry of certain celebrities and famous people, not just musicians, but you can look at Hollywood actors, politicians, business leaders, such as Bill Gates. You know, if we were doing a drinking game here where people take a swig every time Bill Gates' name is mentioned, everyone would be on the floor by now, wouldn't they? But it does become interesting to look at Bill Gates because his father, William Gates Sr., was a prominent member of Planned Parenthood, which is a eugenics operation, all about weeding out, as they see it, the undesirable parts of the population and just allowing the more desirable members of society, i.e. them and their own kind, to procreate their genes. So that's who Bill Gates really is. But anyway, that's an aside. So you've got all these bloodline family links. Madonna's a great example. Madonna, we're told, just came to New York from Michigan, penniless, didn't know anyone. She wanted to become a big star, wanted to become successful, so she did a bit of networking, worked really hard and played some shows, got to know some people, and she just happened to make it against all the odds and become the superstar that she is today. But delving into the genealogy of Madonna, we find that she's connected to all kinds of other people. So it's on the public record. There have been mainstream interviews where she's mentioned that she's cousins with Lady Gaga and Ellen DeGeneres. Degenerate, or whatever her name is. But then the family tree goes even further, and you find out that Madonna ties into the Bush family, who themselves are tied one way or another through cousins and such to Obama, to Dick Cheney, to Brad Pitt, to all kinds of other famous people, and it just becomes ridiculous. So now you realize why people like that become successful, because they were born into it. And then others become successful through playing the industry game and showing themselves to be willing to do whatever is required of them to get to the top. And a good indicator of that when it comes to British artists is whether they've got a Sir in front of their name. So Sir Elton John, Sir Paul McCartney, Sir Mick Jagger. And those last three are what I refer to as lifetime actors. That's a phrase that was coined by the researcher Joe Atwill. And a lifetime actor is someone who is put into the public eye, and we think of them as one thing, a musician, an actor, a business leader, and we grow to trust them because we've decided we like them. And so we tend to follow them. And if they push a certain agenda our way, we tend to go with it because we like that person. But the truth of the matter is that all along they are pushing agendas and they're doing the bidding of those that really control them. And just this last weekend, we had this remote concert called One World, which probably should have been called the New World Order concert. And it's reinforcing this idea that, hey, folks, it's not so bad that you're staying at home, you're in isolation. You can still watch this great concert. And look, all these musicians with big hearts that just care have all come together and they're performing from their living room. Isn't that great? And they're all linking up around the world, and you can just stay in and look at your computer screen. And who needs to go to a concert with 10,000 people and have that vibe and that atmosphere when you can have it in your living room on your laptop? So Paul McCartney was there, Elton John was there, Mick Jagger was there, and it was all curated by Lady Gaga, because who else would you want to curate a concert, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just a good example of what I refer to as lifetime actors. These are people that are wheeled out whenever there's an agenda to push, a narrative to prop up. You've got to watch these people and their extracurricular activities. So what are they doing when they're not being rock stars? And you often find they're fronting some charity or other. They're fronting some NGO or other. They're fronting some cause or other. And this is them showing their true colours. And they're letting you know that they're assets of those that control the industry. And the only reason they've been served up to you as celebrities is so that you trust them, like them, and you listen to what they say. I've got a sort of fairly topical example involving Madonna, if you'd like me to go into.
Absolutely.
So I mentioned earlier the Eurovision Song Contest, which up until recent years was this very crap, cheesy, corny sort of show. It was really naff acts and really bad music and costumes and hair, and nobody ever took it seriously. It was just a laughing stock. But in recent times, that, in line with all these other shows, the Super Bowl, the Grammys, has become very dark, very satanic, very ritualistic. And last year, May 2019, we had Madonna doing a performance at the Eurovision. 61 years of age. It seems you can never retire when you're a lifetime actor. So she's in her Madam X persona. She's got a patch over one of her eyes. Symbolism there. And she's performing on stage with a group of dancers who are all wearing gas masks. Go figure. She's singing this song with this other sort of reggae guy. I don't even know his name because it's so bloody awful. I only looked at it for research purposes. He's drenched in auto-tune, which is pushing transhumanism, but that's another matter. And this song has lyrics that go, not everybody here is going to make it. Not everyone is coming to the future. And then she turns around and blows, and you hear this sound like the wind. And all these dancers in gas masks fall over like they've just died of, I don't know, a highly infectious virus, maybe.
Oh, right.
At the same time as that show, Madonna put out her album, Madam X. And on the reverse of the album sleeve, there's a picture of her typing at a typewriter. The brand of the typewriter is a Smith Corona.
Oh, wow.
Now, again, some people will probably say, oh, that's just a coincidence. But come on now. I think anyone with a brain capable of critical thought would have to conclude that indicated advanced knowledge of this narrative that was to come from Madonna back in May 2019. And this whole thing would have been planned long before that. But it does show that the likes of Madonna and many of these other celebrities are in on it, and they know what's coming. Another example was Tom Hanks, who we're told had to isolate with his wife in Australia when he went over there early on in all this, and he apparently contracted symptoms of the virus. So he started tweeting and putting out messages, and he said that he had a typewriter with him because he collects typewriters. Who doesn't go away overseas with a typewriter in their luggage? I mean, come on, let's face it. And his typewriter just happened to be a Corona as well. And he also tweeted a message that during isolation, he played a game of bridge with his wife and she beat him by 201 points, as in Event 201, the Bill Gates sponsored simulation exercise that predicted the very scenario that we've got now. Why? Because Bill Gates was behind putting the whole thing together. Then you got Michael Stipe of the group REM, who put out a video in March, round about the time of St. Patrick's Day in Ireland, when they closed all the pubs. Straight mockery, closing the pubs in Ireland on St. Patrick's Day, right? And Michael Stipe's got this big Duper's Delight grin on his face as he's singing his song, "It's the End of the World as We Know It." And then he says, "Don't worry, we'll all celebrate in 4 months." 4 months on from March is July. So does that indicate that Michael Stipe moves in such circles as to have inside knowledge that something's going to happen in July, or maybe the bulk of this will be over by July? But it just goes to show that these celebrities aren't just random people that have worked their way up the ladder of success. They've been selected and picked for the job, and they're assets of the system the whole way.
Wow, man. That's incredible. And see, that's not like one of those YouTube videos where you just, a lot of people just get on YouTube and they look up Illuminati or New World Order, and it's like, look, if you draw this here and you draw that there and you put this together, it's the shape of the all-seeing eye. That stuff does get kind of, look, it's a Dorito. It's the shape of the all-seeing eye kind of thing. I mean, what you're talking about here is something blatantly obvious, where you can see rituals and you can see not only the ritual, but the symbolism and the energy that's focused around this in a very psychological and on point type of way, where it's obvious to anybody that studied this stuff. And
can I add something to that, Joe?
Yeah, go ahead.
That One World Together at Home, Global Citizen, WHO, Lady Gaga get together. Of course, the logo is basically a little house with a red dot signifying, I guess you could say, AI, HAL, or you're being recorded. If you want to communicate with others, take the tape off your camera. But if you think about things like something that is stuck with us for ages, a story like Beauty and the Beast is really a prince who was turned into this monster, and it's only through love, it's through harmony, it's through Belle, through music, that brings about a transformation of the beast back into his divine form. And the rose is used in the story to signify that transformation and that alchemical process. We find that same kind of a thing in something like The Wizard of Oz, with the mineral body, the animal body, the vegetable body. Those elements that are incorporated into these stories ensures that sacred information will be passed on from generation to generation. And these things, for the most part, are very powerful archetypes that resonate with us on a subconscious level, and we are entertained by them. And the word entertain means to direct attention. So when we direct our attention, we pay attention. Much like when we pay for entertainment, we pay in currency, which is energy. And if you pay attention to people, for example, a lot of my listeners know I talk about Billie Eilish, for example, and her connection to the demon ball, or Kanye West, or Poppy. Kanye West had a song almost a decade ago where he talked about the countdown, counting down to something. This is a common theme in the music industry. Poppy has a song called Time Is Up, where humans are exterminated by an AI, artificial intelligence system. And I think part of the lockdown and quarantine, to bring this around full circle, and as part of the predictive programming with artificial intelligence now being rolled out as a solution to the problem of contact tracing and things like that, is that all of us, you, me, Mark, everyone listening, are being designated by people that are both quote-unquote elected and unelected, like Bill Gates, as essential or non-essential. In a sense, it's like the Twilight Zone. Some of you are now obsolete. The state has decided that you are obsolete and you will no longer have a job or have a purpose. You will be replaced like the scientist Lovelock said, you'll be replaced by robots, and you will basically be like a houseplant to the robot AI technology that comes next, with the technocratic elite controlling what you do with your lives, and the rest of you are obsolete and insignificant and non-essential. Goodbye.
Wow.
And Ryan, in the Poppy video there, when she's feeding her followers those pills that she's putting on the tongue, and then they all die, she's got this smirk on her face. And it's the same smirk that I see on Bill Gates' face every time he does an interview. He can't stop himself smirking.
He's smart. Yep, exactly. And she feeds them not the red pill, but she feeds them the blue pill to put them into the matrix, and their faces become digitized.
Yeah. I wonder if Bill Gates will be smirking when it comes time to answer for the way he's lived his life. Probably not.
Well, you know what I think we ought to do is we ought to tie him up and then just put all kinds of vaccines in him if he believes them so much, just all at once, just every vaccine known to man, and just let him have it all at one big chunk.
He doesn't vaccinate his own kids, does he?
No. He doesn't. And listen, we got to get out of here. Mark, Devlin, thank you so much for coming on the broadcast, man. It's an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you.
Well, thanks for the invitation, man. I appreciate it. I'm glad I did the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Mark.
No problem. And thank you too, Ryan, for coming on. And you guys go check out the website. If you don't know who Mark is, markdevlin.co.uk, youtube.com/Mark Devlin TV, and go check out his books on Amazon. The Musical Truth on Amazon especially. And we'll be back tomorrow night with open lines. Big shout out to the Fringe FM staff, Barbara, Amanda, Jeremy, Scott, Eric, all of you guys over there. Pacho, thank you for making the show happen, brother. And Steezy, Stevie, and Chronox are the music. Please don't copy the show without written permission. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Good night.
On this program do not necessarily reflect those of the Fringe FM, KTLK Digital Broadcasting, its sponsors, affiliates, or staff. Listener discretion is advised.